Hello and welcome to the latest edition of On the Whistle. I'm Phil from the Sunderland Echo. Unfortunately, for the sixth game in a row, we're talking about another Sunderland defeat. A strange game today, really, in that first half Sunderland were 2-0 down, and I thought they were probably pretty lucky to only be 2-0 down. I thought Southampton were by far the better team. I thought Sunderland made so many errors in possession, and to be honest, it was almost too comfortable for Southampton. I felt if they'd been a bit more ruthless and a bit more clinical, they could really have been out of sight, and Sunderland were probably fortunate to only be 2-0 behind. Start of the second half really poor again, and then a sort of 20-minute period really where the game completely changed. Dodds brought on Adil Al-Shish and Nazri Rusin, and I thought Sunderland did quite well for a little bit. They got up the pitch, they showed some aggression, they showed some intent, they played forward quicker, which was a big thing, and they managed to get themselves 2-2, managed to get the game back to 2-2, and it looked like they might be able to put a bit of an end to that win and run. And actually Southampton looked under pressure for a little while, but then 2 goals in a couple of minutes, sort of killed the game off. And to be fair to Sunderland, at the moment they're not getting any luck, and Dan Ballard going off with an injury, you could see that really destabilised the back line at a crucial moment in the game, and that was one of the reasons why Southampton were able to run out winners. But I have to say that from in my view, over the course of 90 minutes they were more than the worthy winners. And Sunderland now 6 defeats in a row. For any Sunderland team at Championship level, I just don't think that's good enough, even if we accept that the last 3 opponents have been of a really high standard, especially the last 2. I think it sums it up for me a little bit when you see Southampton bringing players of Joe Rothwell's quality off the bench. That's a player, a Premier League player who's had an outstanding career at Championship level, experience. Yes, it shows you some of the challenges Sunderland have got in coming up against these teams with big budgets and real squad depth, and it is hard to compete with these teams. I also think it shows the limitations maybe of what they've done over the last couple of windows, because it's these kind of players that can make all the difference in sort of a long 46 game season and a promotion push. And I think it's probably another day where the depth in Sunderland's squad's been exposed a little bit. So thanks for all your questions and comments. As ever, quite a lot of them sort of touch on the same theme, so if I don't mention you directly, I have seen your comment and your question. Thanks so much for sending them in. Hopefully I'll cover off sort of all the topics that people have asked about, and then at least we can crack on with that. So the first one I've got, which is one that's come with a lot of different ways that this has been asked, but the question is essentially, do I see someone bringing in sort of a manager until the end of the season, essentially bringing in another interim boss, if you like? I think that a lot of you are looking for someone maybe with a bit more experience. What's my honest view on that? I'll give you what I think will happen and also my view on it. So first and foremost, I don't think that Sunderland will do that. I think that they'll feel that at this moment they have enough points on the board and enough games left in the season that they don't need to push the panic button, if you like. I think their view will be that there's been enough in some of the games under Mike Dodds to show that the players are still with him and that he can get some results. I think the big thing that they'll be looking at is their view, I think, will be that after the international break, when hopefully a few bodies come back, Patrick Roberts and Adji Elise obviously being the 2 big ones. You can also throw Bradley Dack in there, eventually Jack Clark. Luke O'Nien will obviously be back from suspension after the international break. I think their view at the moment will still be that they can survive this season fairly comfortably, and therefore they don't need to push the panic button. I also think it's something they'll be very reluctant to do, because I know they see Mike Dodds as a huge part of their future. My personal view is kind of twofold. I think ultimately, although I am very, very worried, because I don't think Sunderland are going to win many games between now and the end of the season because of their attacking issues, which were on show again today, I do think there's probably enough teams between them and the bottom 3 not to be overly concerned. I do think Dodds will get enough results when the injuries are back. I also have a lot of sympathy for Mike Dodds, to be honest, up to a point, because I think he's been dealt a very difficult hand in terms of the players he's had unavailable. And I think that's been a big factor in the recent results. And also, obviously, this week he has come up against a strong calibre of opposition. So I do think we'll see an improvement in results eventually, but it's not going to be enough to get us excited, and ultimately it's not going to be enough to stop this season from being anything other than a bit of disappointment. But as we'll come on to later, my view is that Dodds is obviously accountable for results. That's 4 defeats in a row, but I think the questions go a little bit higher for me. So hopefully that kind of answers that question. I do want to go on to another couple of questions that you've asked though, and I think it's a fair one to bring up after today. Keith asked, why can Dodds not pick a starting 11 4th consecutive game where it's taken until 5-10 minutes in the second half before switching things? Yeah, I can understand that comment today. As I say, I do think Dodds has been dealt a really difficult hand in terms of the players he's consistently had unavailable. As I said, I think on the previous On the Whistle, I think even very, very, very high class experienced manager would struggle when you take Clark, Pritchard, Roberts, O'Nien out of this group. I think what's fair to say, and a couple of you have also asked around this, so I'll mention this as well, the striking selection really didn't work today. I can understand the need to have a look at players and to give them opportunities, but I think it was really, I don't think we've seen enough from Mason Burstow over the course of his loan spell to warrant a recall, really, especially at this point of the season, whereby I would rather probably see Sunderland develop players or look to develop players who are going to be here next season. So I'm not sure the balance between getting results now and development was really served by picking Burstow. At least with, I know Rooson's far from the finished article, but his running does cause teams problems. And so that's a decision now I would like to have been seen made from the start today. And I also think not picking Al-Shish off the back of his Leicester cameo was a poor call. I think that when you're struggling for your creativity and struggling to create chances as Sunderland are, I don't understand not picking a player who always looks to try something, always looks to pass forward, always looks to make something happen. And I thought, even though, all right, there was nothing sparkling today, a big assist or a goal or anything like that, I thought he immediately improved Sunderland's intensity and made them look more threatening. I asked Dodds about that in the press conference, and he said he wanted to pick Rig because of how good Rig had been the other night. And I totally accept that. I think that's fair, but I think you could have played Al-Shish and Rig, to be honest, whether it be, you could have played Rig out wide off the right as he's shown off the bench, he's looked good. You could have pushed Job up front, which is something he's done reasonably well at times this season. I think that's something going forward. If, and it looks likely, it's going to be the same group of players available next weekend, then I don't see how Al-Shish can't start. And for all, I have to say that I don't lay the blame for this run at Mike Dodds. I think it's about the squad depth and the poor decision to replace Mowbray with Beale and what that's done over the course of the season. I do think today the selection wasn't right, and it is frustrating to sort of see Sunderland look so much better after the substitutions, because who knows, maybe they'd have got something out of the game if they'd gone with it earlier. So let's see what other questions we've got here. So Tony sent one in. Thanks, Tony. Says, will this self-induced implosion at the club make us less attractive to potential new managers and players during the summer window? Yes and no. I still ultimately think it's presuming Sunderland during the Championship, which I'm sure there will be, even though at the moment it is a concern. I think it's still an attractive destination for young players because you'll get opportunities, and even in the poor run at the moment, they're keeping that faith. I still think the fan base and the potential and some elements of the recruitment in recent times does mean that it's a really potentially attractive job to head coaches. But I do think people will definitely have their reservations based on how the last couple of transfer windows have gone, what happened with Tony Mowbray, and obviously the current level of performance. And I think it is something that potential head coaches will be asking. They'll want to know what the plans are if Jack Clark leaves, because at the moment his absence is making a massive impact on the squad. I think you would want to know what the plans are to replace him, how they're going to go about that. And I do think that if Sunderland want to get the calibre of head coach that they need in the summer, then there are things they're going to have to think about. Because at the moment, if you're a head coach who wants to potentially earn a promotion in the Premier League and take a team up, I think Sunderland would interest you, but I think you'd have a lot of questions. Is there going to be that balance in terms of getting a bit of experience into the team? Is there going to be a bit of flexibility in terms of maybe bringing in that experienced loanee who can make the difference? And you certainly want to know what the plans are if key players do leave, which at this point has to be a possibility because we're now pretty much sure that Sunderland aren't going up. So I hope that answers your question, Tony. I do think that some coaches and players will have their reservations, but I don't think it's sort of a terrible situation. I do think it'll still be a relatively attractive destination. Quite a few of you saying that, to be honest, you just want to forget about the football for a while, and I can completely understand that. It's a really, really difficult time, and six defeats in a row isn't really good enough. A lot of you are asking just generally, or offering your comments generally around the ownership and around Christian Speakman, which I think is, I think you're probably a bit bored of hearing me talk about this because we seem to be coming back around to it all the time. But I do think ultimately the story of this season, it's not necessarily about Mike Dodds or the players themselves in terms of the performances. I think ultimately what we have seen over the last few weeks is that the depth in the squad just isn't there. Not enough players who've signed over the last two transfer windows have been ready to make a consistent impact. And so while I have a lot of sympathy in that a lot of important players are missing at the moment, and that's clearly damaging the team and it's having an impact on results, a lot of that is self-inflicted because it's a squad game. The Championship is a brutal division. It's 46 games and you're playing against some high calibre opposition. And I think that's something that, there needs to be a big reflection, I think, at Sunderland about what's gone wrong. And it should be partially about Christian Speakman, but it shouldn't just be about him either. I still think there's a lot of questions. Ultimately, Christian Speakman's, executing the strategy of the club's ownership. And I think that's where the fundamental questions have to lie. A, in the way the Tony Mowbray situation was handled, because whatever your thoughts on Tony himself, that badly derailed Sunderland's season. And two, Speakman is working within the budget and the strategy that's set for him by the ownership. So while it's totally fair to discuss the level of player that's come in and the way the recruitment's faltered over the last 2 windows, fundamentally they're going down that strategy because of budget. And I think it's fair to question, whether the ownership are going to reflect on what's gone wrong of late and put the steps that are needed to rectify that moving into the summer. And at the moment, a lot of you are asking where are these wins going to come from. As I say, the only positive I can really give you is that I do think that when a few key players come back, this team will look a bit stronger, and I do think there's enough there in order to get the results they need not to go down and to sort of stabilise in mid-table. But the one thing I would never want to do is to suggest that that's okay or something to be pleased about, because this was a really exciting young team that we all loved watching, and I do feel it's almost entirely self-inflicted the way the season's ebbed away, and we're now facing 9 games with very little to play for other than getting those wins not to worry. So yeah, really, really disappointing. Thanks again for sending your questions and comments, and everything crossed that we can talk about something a little bit cheerier next Saturday. But listen, QPR will be a tough game. They've been a lot better of late. So thanks again for watching, for all your questions and comments. And all your stories from the game, all the post-match reaction, and all the build up to next week will be over on the Sunderland website. Cheers.